Yeah, that's what we got going on. We're going to talk about Nomi because some of us have trained on it and we've even received preliminary scores. Very limited sample. One day does not a trend make. And so it's interesting, but we can compare what we've seen for previous rounds with Kazutsugi data compared to newly trained models with Nomi. Personally, the two models I deployed did really good the previous round on Kazutsugi, had a little bit lower performance on the target Nomi training, but it's too soon to say anything about that.
Wait, all right.
Perhaps that's the true outcome.
Yeah. Do you have? I mean, you'd really need like A/B tests of like the same
Yes,
model trained both ways at the same round.
100%, and have the same scoring on.
Yeah.
So that's why I say it's far too soon to.
Right. I mean, I
put
think
anything
I
on
think
it.
JRB had a fair like that test. He basically has the same model trained on both,
Yes.
and so he has scores for both, and they're virtually identical as far as I can tell.
Yeah, where we're able to do A/B testing, if somebody has enough model slots and can do that, that's by far the best way. But it's still too soon.
Yeah.
We still
Yeah.
don't have enough information. But yeah, so I think next round, so over the weekend, I should have 6 total models
Nice.
trained
Yeah.
on Nomi.
I have three. My three biggest stakes are all trained on Nomi now.
Well, yeah, I mean, lean on it. Why don't you? Yeah, by all means. So also, Wigglemuse, thanks for hopping on because you and Michael Oliver had a very interesting discussion on distribution of the targets. And I'm sure we'll get to that. I'm not going to open with it because I'm going to let Michael Oliver talk to us about what he's seen so far.
Well, should we start or?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're live, fam. Let's do it.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what you guys are curious about. I mean, the target probably is a little bit harder because it is closer to what we actually want. The Kazutsugi target is so I mean the things we actually care about have a particular distribution, and it's not a uniform distribution. And the uniform distribution potentially makes things seem a little bit easier than they really are. As people sort of rightly noted, and we mentioned this before, we really care about the sort of extremes of your scores, and the new target tends to highlight is sort of you need to do better on the extremes to do well on the new target, which makes a lot of sense. And because that's what we actually care about, and then what actually translates into performance for the fund.
Michael Oliver, I have bad news.
Yeah.
I had the wrong audio capture.
Oh no.
Up until 15 seconds ago.
I don't think I've said anything super important yet.
But you did say, and I'm sorry, that was definitely my bad. I switched from using my headphones and I forgot that I was capturing the same feed. Anyway, that's my bad. But you were saying the gist of what you're saying, and I'll try to summarize, and then maybe you can spawn off and go a little further.
Sure.
The Nomi target represents what you see in the data the equities that are being traded by the hedge fund. And so now the target represents reality more closely, and it is a harder target to find signal on.
It's because reality is harder than,
of course,
the Kazutsugi. The actual, like, if you look at the actual scores on the thing we care about, they're even lower than they would be on like Nomi. So it's a sort of a good compromise in a way. It's and models trained on Nomi generalize better to the thing we care about. Yeah, it's and since people have been asking, I actually investigated some continuous target ideas yesterday, and they work worse. They're just worse. So I've become more and more convinced the more I've looked at it that Nomi is actually the right target. I mean, yeah, it's probably the target we should have had initially, but that was before my time.
Indeed. But Let's just blame it on Mike P.
No, it's before his time even.
Oh, I was trying so hard to troll him, and you shut me down. No, I like Mike P. I only pick. Remember, folks, I only pick on people that I like. It's the truth. So, yeah, Mike P. Much
But
respect.
yeah, having the 5 levels does seem to help with regularization. Does seem to help with model being able to generalize better. It also is important for obfuscation.
Right.
And because we want the data to be obfuscated and you not to be able to figure out what everything corresponds to. With a continuous target, that'd be easier to determine. But if a continuous target worked better, we might go that route, but it doesn't. I don't see any evidence that a continuous target would actually give help at all.
So I'm going to ask a naive question, and this kind of gets into a bit about what you and Wigglemuse were talking about in Rocket Chat. And this is not the start of that discussion. This is just a sidebar, because I can do that. If you take the training data set and you shuffle it, it thereby shuffles the rank. And so does your performance change as a result?
Wait, that would only matter if there were ties.
Well, there is in the target column.
Yeah, sure, but it only matters if there's ties in your predictions. Because the ties are only being broken in your predictions.
Wigglemuse is shaking his head yes.
That's right. What he just said, I concur.
Okay. I trust y'all. I just know that when the scoring function is run, and I looked at the NumPy source code, both columns.
If your predictions had ties and you were able to shuffle them up, which you are not anymore since you have to put things in a particular order, then it would matter. But because they're broken by first, which is essentially row order, which is essentially random as far as we know. But the targets we're scored against are never, are not tied, are not broken. So, which we'll get into.
So it doesn't. It only matters if there are ties in your predictions that the ties being broken. So shuffling them makes no difference if there's no ties.
No, I know that our predictions, if they were shuffled, it wouldn't matter because we have to rank them anyway.
Right.
Part of the scoring is to rank the columns. What I mean is, particularly for the validation data, if you were to shuffle that, since there are many ties.
It's only in your predictions.
You're still telling me no, Wigglemuse. Still telling me no.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's still right. Because the ties of the targets are never broken. So the order of those doesn't matter because they're never broken. So the order doesn't come into play as far as breaking ties because the ties aren't broken. In other words, the score is done like this. You have your predictions, which are ranked, and the targets, which are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's say, and that's it. And then the Pearson correlation is done on that. We think of it as Spearman, but actually it's Pearson done on ranks of your predictions against targets, which are still in their 5 buckets.
Yep.
So first never ever applies to the targets because there's no ranking or tie breaking done on the targets. Now, he sort of floated the idea yesterday that maybe we should allow ranks in the targets, which was why I was so confused because I thought that would be a definite non-starter over there. And
that's probably where I got tripped up then.
That's where we're going to get into that discussion at some point here.
Okay. Well,
yeah, so I was not saying that I would allow ranks because basically Spearman correlation is rank both sides of the new Pearson correlation.
Right.
And what we're currently doing is ranking the predictions and doing Pearson. And so what I was saying is that if we no longer break ties in the predictions, it doesn't have the same sort of theoretical issue of maxing out earlier.
But it has a different theoretical issue, so we should discuss that.
Sure.
We'll get there. We'll get there. But there has been a lot of discussion in Rocket Chat, and that's what prompted me to go ahead and just do this discussion again. Since the time we last spoke, we now have the data, and some of us deployed models on that data. And Yeah, so mostly I just wanted to give people a chance to talk about it with you. It's kind of like a discussion. There's not much of an interview to be had. It's
Sure.
more
Yeah.
of a
I want to hear
questions and
people's
comments
questions.
session, right? I mean, I could
Uh,
interview you, but I don't know, like, why do you have fire starter by your fireplace? It's freaking September.
it's been there forever.
Okay, so maybe I just noticed it for the first time,
Yeah.
but like it's 87 degrees Fahrenheit in my town right now.
It's actually cold.
It's crazy.
It's fall is officially here, and it's raining right now.
There is no fall in Florida, so yeah, I cannot relate to that. I don't know what that means.
Hey, I live in Savannah, Georgia, and I have a fireplace in every room because this house is
Really?
140 years old. So,
Every room.
well, because it was built in 1860 or something. So
That's kind of cool.
back then there was no heat except for the fireplace.
I have never had a house with a fireplace. I do not know the first thing about fireplaces.
Really?
Yeah, true story. True story. So I'm mostly filibustering and let people get some questions in. So, oh, hold on. Let me move this chat window out of the way from Joe.
But yeah, one thing I will say about the new target, about why it's important, is training a single model on the new target allows me to get a model that works better than the current meta model for us, which was not possible before in the old target. I think so. If everyone is training on the new target, they should make the meta model even better. Because a single model has like basically never been able to be anywhere close to the meta model before.
Right.
With the new target, I can make a model that has a better returns and almost as good Sharp as the meta model. And so that's. So yeah, I mean, in order for the sort of tournament to be viable and for people, I mean,
Right.
We need you guys to train on it too, so that we can make the meta model better.
Then why did I get worse performance today?
Yeah.
I didn't do A/B testing. I'm sorry. I shouldn't even go down that road.
I mean, yeah, it looks like in general the curve is starting to turn over. Just looking at trend lines for a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's just where we are in the market cycles.
It's too soon. I hate to even say that, but somebody's going to. Zen said, I want to take the two questions in Zoom. Joe got the first one in. So Joe says, what about models trained on Nomi scored on live continuous targets? I would presume that our live results are continuous, but maybe not. I don't know.
No, you guys are scored against targets that are generated in the same way that historical targets are.
Okay, so they are quantized.
Yeah, if you were scored against the actual numbers, your scores would be much lower. So that's.
I'm never bringing that up again, Joe. Yeah. How dare you ask that? I'll ever ask that question again. Okay, I tease. Zen Nasdaq jockey. If your new model consistently outperforms the meta model, will you fire us?
No, because I believe that if you guys are all training on the new target, then you will be even better. I mean, it's sort of like this model was here, the meta model is here, the new model is like a little bit above that, and so if everyone can bring that up, right. Then the meta model goes up a lot. And that was my goal for this quarter, was to increase the meta model performance. And I found that the most straightforward way to do that is to change the target for everyone in that role.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm cool with that as long as my payout doesn't suffer. But we won't know until we know. Joe says better on the test set doesn't necessarily mean better on live scores, though, right?
The increased performance that I've seen has carried over into the most recent rounds. So,
all right, so we do have a little bit of out of samples. That's good to know. I'm having to watch a bunch of chat windows, so I apologize. I'm darting all over the place here. So Zen has another question: are the new Nomi targets just forced into a new probability distribution, or is something else going on?
That's basically it. It's just a change in the distribution.
Right.
It's not strictly binning of things. It's a little more complicated than that because the targets have to be neutral to a bunch of things.
Right.
So it's not just strictly binning. but it is the only change over Kazutsugi is a change in the sort of forced distribution of the targets. Before they were forced to be uniform, now they're forced to have this particular like 5, 20, 50 distribution.
Let's do a couple of Slido questions. Will the payout structure change once the Nomi targets are used as the live targets, and if so, how?
Currently, we're thinking no. I have some. I want to look at some ideas people have been talking about. Like maybe, yeah. I'm thinking probably not. The payout structure works pretty well.
Yeah.
There are some other things we're working on in the pipeline that I think that you guys will like as far as payout things. But the overall payout for the tournament, I don't think we're planning to change.
This is probably a good chance to segue into what you and Wigglemuse were talking about, since we were on the topic of payout. Wigglemuse, can you give us a high-level summary of what you were discussing in Rocket Chat yesterday?
Well, the other day I tested a model with the new targets, and specifically interested not in the new targets themselves, whether they're better or worse, or how we're being scored right at this moment, but the transition that we're going to see in a month or whenever it is, but to the new targets as the scoring targets, and whether that is going to make us make less money. And I was just checking the scores on models trained on the new target, scored the old way, and then scored the new way, assuming the new way is the same as the old way. And I was getting lower scores. So I thought, well, it could just be the model, or, you know, I had never checked before, but I realized in the past that since you're doing these buckets, you're not allowing the full range of -1 to +1 theoretically in your correlation score. And so I checked what that actual number was in the old way, because they're all even, is something like 98%, like we were discussing. So it's almost 1. And again, we only get to 0.05 or whatever usually anyway. So it is not necessarily even an issue at all, but maybe it is. And then I checked the theoretical maximum if we're scored the same way with the new distribution, and it's about 0.91. So there's some theoretical maximum shrinkage, which is symmetrical, of course, but if we're making money most of the time, it could potentially ding our amount that we're making by some amount. It could be like a not even noticeable, and we could never notice it anyways because we're not getting both scores, but maybe it would be happening. So I just brought it up to something to look at. And then we got in, and he said, oh, I'll look at that. And I said, cool. And then we got into that discussion yesterday where I was confused about what he was saying in terms of, because he said, well, we can solve that problem easily just by doing something with it's only caused by the ties in the user predictions, which thought, in my head, I was saying, what ties in the user predictions? We don't have ties if we're making good models. And so we went around and around that. And then I finally realized he was saying, if we allowed ties and didn't break those ties on the user predictions, then that maximum goes back up. But the issue I have with that is that in order to realize that change, to get back up to the theoretical maximum of 0.98, like we have now, is that you basically have to bin all of your predictions exactly in that. I mean, only exact ties would have any effect at all. It's not like you could just bunch up your things differently or something. You'd actually have to go all in and only submit 5 unique values, which I figured they would not want at all. But maybe that would be okay with them.
I don't think that would be very good.
It just seems like a bad idea on the face of it. And then I checked some other models, again, new versus old scoring, and I keep getting lower scores, all trained on Nomi, mind you. I keep getting lower scores on the Nomi model, so I'm a little worried about that. So I would rather see if there's any adjustment to be made, some sort of scaling factor, and then we could just forget about it.
Right.
But maybe it's all nonsense.
I don't
It
know.
doesn't matter at all because, again, we're at the extremes and maybe we never know. But the changes I'm seeing in my scores between U and O are more dramatic than could be accounted for by this factor, but that factor may be in there. So it's probably something to do with overfitting, and I got to make my models better for this target set.
So, Michael Oliver, that does bring about some questions because even Joe is asking, let me just see if I think I scrolled past it. If our average correlation is lower, we're essentially getting a pay cut.
Yeah, so I
don't like the way you just opened that sentence.
Yeah, no, I wanted to respond to something what Wigglemuse said.
Yep. Okay, go ahead. We can
first.
We can do it.
Yeah, so like I don't think that the difference only really makes a difference with if there are ties in your predictions, and we're so far away from the maximum prediction performance that I think it's all kind of academic. I don't think it's not like it's not like a linear scaling factor where that it scales everything down. And so,
because it's clipped at 0.25.
Yeah, and it's and we're so far away from. So I don't think there's any benefit for trying to bin your scores or anything. I think it'll probably only hurt you to bin your scores because your scores are so far from being exactly right.
Right. Well, I just thought it was a kind of a cop-out to say that. Well, we can just allow ties and problem solve because binning our scores is such a terrible solution to that problem. You're essentially saying, I'm ignoring this problem and giving you a terrible solution to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying.
I would rather you would say, that problem is academic. I'm ignoring it for that reason. Or we're gonna give you this tiny point something bump in magnitude, and that will take care of it.
I am saying that the problem is academic and doesn't actually matter.
I don't think anybody can prove anything, but
we can't falsify it because we don't have the data.
It's
right. It's academic in the sense that the magnitude is so small that it may not matter, but that doesn't mean it's not actually real. So if the distribution, say, changes again in the future to some huge effect, then we would have to tackle that. Anyways, I think these theoretical things should at least be, churned over and thought about because they are.
I think the major contribution to lower scores is the target just being a little bit harder. Because it is more real, and because for instance, the previously the ones and the 0.75s and the ones would be 40% of the distribution. Now they're 25% of the distribution. So your extreme values, the things you have to predict are sort of harder overall. You're predicting a smaller set of things you need to get right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, there's two ways to look at it. That you will probably need to make better models to get the same score.
It seems like the narrative has changed. First, it was here's Nomi, which is a better target and it makes everything better and we're all going to be better. And now a week later, it's harder. It's going to be harder to get better scores and you're probably all going to lose a little bit.
Hold on. Let me take this from a finance perspective. If you lower your variance, you do have necessarily a less risky model. And so you will hit less.
If our downsides are improved.
You lower the downside, but you also lower your upside. So your payout week to week is lower, but your Sharp can go up. And I think we've seen that. When you compare training on Nomi, evaluating on Kazutsugi, your Sharp's higher. And if that plays out and translates into the live performance, net, it is an improvement. You just have to widen your time frame in your evaluation window.
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
You have lower risk. But
I am totally
curious.
Destroyed recently. So.
I am curious, though, and Joe is the one that formally asked it. If our average correlation is lower, are we essentially getting a pay cut? Or conversely, do we just need to expand our time horizon that we're evaluating on?
Yeah, I think that's right. That you need to expand the time horizon.
Okay.
Because
the volatility should be lower Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
I mean, yeah, and it's a target that will it does seem to generalize better into the future, and I mean across multiple regimes.
Right.
It's just a in some sense the scoring against. I mean, Kazutsugi is regularized in a particular way by having this uniform distribution, which makes the problem seem easier than it actually is. So if anything, you guys have been getting paid too much. You can look at it that way.
And you too, sir.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
one of us.
Exactly. I mean, I have quite a bit staked.
Indeed, you do, sir. Attaboy.
But yeah, it's a tricky thing because like we have to make the target, we have to make the competition reflective of the actual market.
Yes. If we want y'all to manage all the money on the planet, then we got to get the meta model right, and that all goes hand in hand. But I guess the concern is, are we certain that it's a volatility reduction and not that it's just strictly more difficult? So that we won't know until we know, I guess. But we'll see. I don't think you can answer that because we won't know. There's no way to predict how it's going to perform in live data. So it's like it's a hypothetical until we have more data. So let's see what happens. I'm not going to do all of my models on Nomi. I'm doing 6 out of my 10. I'm going to let that ride for a while and then evaluate after the fact. Unless you guys want to give us more slots, in which case I can do A/B testing and then I'll know for sure what I'm going to do. But we can get to that in the fireside chat because that's next week if I remember correctly.
The models that I did train with Nomi do score better on the old scoring system, but new compared to old, the new scores are lower.
Yeah, so that's sort of what you would expect with a target that has more signal in it. That it would be harder against itself, but easier. It would do better against a more regularized target, against like an easier target, because your models are actually getting better by training on the new target. And so if you're scoring on something that's easier, your scores would go up.
As an aside, I don't know if you noticed yesterday, I said, we could average the 2 targets and then we'd end up with this weird target with 9 buckets with 12.5s and 37.5s in it.
That's actually a question in Slido.
It goes up and down. I assume that is just sort of a target that would be slightly better than the old target, but worse than the new target. Do you think there's any point to playing with something like that at all, or it's just stupid?
Yeah, I feel it's probably exactly intermediate. Like your models are going to be roughly intermediate, and I mean, obviously depending on how you train it. I mean, one of the reasons for doing the target Nomi as we did it is keeping the 5 levels is to try to make it as backward compatible with the current target as possible. So if people are doing crazy classification things where they're separating targets by levels and trying to classify things first, we wanted those ideas to still work as well as possible. But obviously, if you mix the target and have these halfway between things, that doesn't work as much.
Well, we don't know. And I imagine people will try because we have some really smart people that participate in this tournament.
Yeah.
So I mean,
you're welcome to try. I don't know that it'll be particularly helpful, but yeah,
somebody's going to try. I know that for sure. It was a question of Slido, so I appreciate
possibly for a pure classifier, you just have more buckets. It might give you some more smoother function or something.
Yeah,
perhaps. You could do weights too. I mean, geez, you can get real fancy. You can weight Nomi 75%, Kazutsugi 25%.
Well, one thing I tried with the original target was like squaring the values, or separating so the tails were farther away from the middle. They weren't all equally spaced, and or shrinking them, that has interesting effects. So, I mean, there's lots of things you can do even with even targets. So.
Yeah.
That's sort of equivalent to just changing your loss function.
If you have a loss function, depends on your model.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get back on the rails, folks. Let's see. So I'm going to get a couple of Zoom questions. We'll go to Slido. Zen/NASDAQ Jockey had a question. Why do you force a probability distribution Why not have 5 or more bins and let the target fall where they may?
Partially it is to keep, partially it's to try to keep the signal as stationary as possible. And because there's no, in some sense, you would have to make your bins unlimited, especially the tail bins unlimited width. It would be, yeah, it's tricky to get bins that would work across time for every era. So we sort of are forcing the bins to be the same, at the same size across eras.
So, correlator, is the method used to generate target Kazutsugi the same as that used for Nomi? If so, how can we compare head to head, or else not?
It is the same method. It just with a different target distribution.
When live metrics? I agree. I'd like to have some live metrics.
So right now we're keeping that data as sort of part of our test set. And so if we were to give you metrics on that, that would be leaking data. And so I'm not sure that's in the works right now.
I forgot that you roll it into your test set.
Yeah. So that's, we haven't actually really been using it yet, but it's sort of like it's a growing new test set.
Right.
I think from the original announcement, it shows like test 1 and then validation 2, and then test 2 is basically everything after validation 2.
I think Joe had a previous suggestion whether we'd have sort of a user test set. In other words, there'd still be a secret set, but if we could get metrics for it because you wouldn't be using it, it would be like a secret validation set and we couldn't fit to it so easily. Would you ever do something like that?
Yeah,
I would recommend, just for the sake of this discussion, that stuff like that go in the fireside chat Slido.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and we are definitely taking that under consideration.
Yeah. Please repost that in the fireside chat Slido. What is the derivation of Nomi? Is it Chef Nomi?
Have we ever explicitly given answers about the target names before?
Today's the day.
I mean, I would just say Google all the previous target names and you'll see a pattern.
Thomas Motz is asking, are there reasons why the validation data can't walk forward in time as we move forward each week? I think it would help users formulate new hypotheses as we move through time instead of training and validating on the same data each week over and over.
I mean, it's very useful for us doing research to have a stable test set.
Right.
And so yeah, so if we were to changes would be any changes going forward would probably be like the one Joaquin mentioned of having like a secret test set where you guys can get metrics on, but not necessarily know what it is. I think that's probably the best solution for that. But giving you guys more data each week would also make you guys want to retrain your models every week, and
it's true.
It would be kind of a bit of a mess, I think.
If a Nomi-trained model is better than a Kaz-trained model at predicting Kaz targets, but worse at predicting Nomi targets, what might be the reason or reasons?
I think I alluded to that a little bit earlier. Where basically, if the target has more signal in it, it'll predict better on a more regularized target. But it might predict worse on itself just because it has actually more signal and more variance.
Okay.
So yeah, I think basically Kaz is an easier target, and so a model trained on Nomi, which has more signal, gets more signal and therefore predicts better on an easier target.
Why do you try to change the Kazutsugi to Nomi? And does it depend on the investment strategy of Numerai? You kind of answer that, right? It just allows the fund to do better. So,
yeah. And as I said before, I mean, we've said before, we care about the extremes of your predictions.
Right.
So having a target that better targets those extremes is useful.
This is anonymous. In my neural net model, target Nomi still doesn't work, and the performance even goes down. This target is valid only for tree models? Question mark.
I mean, yeah, it's just a change in the distribution. And so,
right.
I mean, neural nets are finicky. I mean, one of the reasons why tree-based models have been so successful is they work really well out of the box without that much tuning. Neural nets are harder to train. You can, there's no reason why you couldn't train a neural net to do it. It's just, there's no good out of the box neural network things that will work for everything all the time.
When most slots, I've already asked this before, but it's more important than ever before with the new target. Some of us are bottlenecked on the number of slots.
I don't know. I don't think that's been discussed much recently.
Well, let's make them talk about it in the fireside chat. Somebody post that in that Slido, and then we'll make sure they
talk
get
about
to
that in fireside chat.
Yeah. Also, everybody vote up questions. Like seriously, that matters. Like it gets up to the top. Yes, thank you, Anson. When I said that out loud, I was like, I'm just gonna let that go. When the final files with the Nomi target are available on the API, will the target Kazutsugi column remain there, or that will be completely gone?
We will probably, I mean, yeah, I assume we'll remove that column and just have the new target. We might even rename it to just target rather than target Nomi. So it's just, this is the target.
So today's results showed that my Nomi-trained model performs strictly worse. Feels bad, man. I kind of resemble that, actually. The two models I deployed, it looks like the trend reversal is kicking in, but one day result, it's really tough to say that. Yeah. I think we need to have that question posted again next week.
I mean, yeah, you can't really tell unless you have the same model trained on both targets on live data. Because like, yeah, I mean, it looks like the trend is starting to go down in general for people. So
we'll see. Mean reversion is the thing, folks. So
yeah, so
mean is zero. We shouldn't expect to stay positive all the time.
You can't. Yeah, you can't compare week over week when you change targets across models.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
All right, everybody, have a great day. And Joe, have a nice nap. Thanks for hopping on. Hope it was worth your time.